Thomas, well, has had presentations already during this seminar. Professor retired, that's the best thing I think we can do, but pretty active still. Professor Young Geography in Sweden. Did do quite a lot in his presentations also on borders in Central Europe. And recently, quite interesting, and it popped up in one of your presentations, on this project of religion and education, which is, I think, quite interesting. This talk is on time and space in border studies. Well, as a geographer, of course, coming from Sweden, I think you set your goals high and try to step in the footsteps of Thomas Hegerstrand. Thomas Hegerstrand, yeah. So I am delighted to give you the floor and entertain us.
I will try. When I got this invitation from the organizers, thank you very much, and I just wondered why. There may be two reasons that, in a way, are related, and it's about time or age. We've been talking at several sessions that the Portuguese-Spanish border is the oldest one in Europe, with some exceptions. We will visit for the events tomorrow. But this Norwegian-Swedish border also belongs to one of those thick lines on one of those classical maps of the age of borders in Europe. And the other thing related to age, which is my age, I look around and I wonder if anybody here, raise your hand, started with border studies in 1970. It was a period that is not very much mentioned today, but there was a lot of border studies. Claude Festin, Moise Burger, and many others doing studies especially in the Geneva and the Basel region. And also, I remember a Dutch book, The Grens, the Scheiding of Opmoeting, is that somehow correct? That I tried to read. So there was not very intense, but there was still some border studies carried out, mainly related to physical planning, but they also had some other connotations. I will try to follow this, but we will see where we end up. We are reaching the limit of this conference. In time geography, and here we are in time geography and Hegerstrand, each event is a container with a chronological and terrestrial walls. We can see them clearly at the borders of time zones at New Year, when new regulations set in at midnight, but with one, in some cases, in a 2 hours delay if we cross over in the westward direction. But what time in some ways is a construct, terrestrial space is visible and tactile. But some of us are interested in the very definition of boundaries, which is in essence to delimit the concept, the spatial metaphor. Others studied consequences, which is really a time metaphor. Time and space in border research can be interpreted in two ways. One is the equivalent of the way historians interpret historiography, the way history has been written before, in other times and hopefully also in other spaces, areas or fields. In other words, our object, the history and spatial extension of border studies. The other interpretation is a scrutiny of how time and space and their combination into time-space is handled in contemporary border studies. And I will dwell on both of these aspects, perhaps more on the first, and finish by just indicating some fields in our field of border research where I find a specific need for further studies, and I have to add my main interest is local cross-border interaction, so down-to-top interaction. So looking back at border research, here I am, 1970, being searched by a Swedish border guard, and you can see the border station here.
Looking very worried.
Yeah, I was. No, I wasn't, but you never get caught on the Norwegian-Swedish border. But they had found that some young guy was coming to and fro several times a day. So they were wondering if I was trying to smuggle something, a car into small pieces or something. And they didn't find anything. Just a lot of not very interesting papers, draft papers. So I'm not going to return to the patriarchs of border research, Ratzel, Kjellén, and not even to my oldest contemporary like Julian Mindy, but to myself 40 years ago in the early 70s. Why did young researchers choose this in double sense limited multidisciplinary object? In most cases, scholars choose because they happen to live or to study in the proximity of an intriguing state boundary of international significance, usually in Western Europe or North America. Doing border studies on the Iron Curtain was of little use. Long were the case for the military or perhaps people in international relations. I was in Berlin 1985 at the German Geographenpark and gave a lecture on the peaceful Norwegian-Swedish border. And the German geographer said, "Hey, is this interesting? We have this." And my reply was, "This is the Berlin Wall, and there you don't see it, but there is a little bar called Land's End." And this was actually Land's End because here is the East German ministries, and a little bit of the wall is still here today in present day Berlin. But in my case, my interest was in a very peaceful line in the forest, and this is my father helping me actually, with a cutting along the line interspersed by cairns with the initials of Danish Norwegians on one side, I think this is the one side, and Swedish kings of the 1750s. No other visible difference. This is Eduardo's map of the area, and I was particularly interested in the southern part, and a little bit of our Norwegian friends area as well.